Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Stories Behind Products number 6. As most of you probably know, sleep apnea can cause severe medical complications. In addition, research shows that undiagnosed and untreated sleep apnea has a high economic impact and endangers public safety. My name is Zoya Demirbilek, and I'm a professor of industrial design at UNSW. I welcome you from the beautiful Bijikul country where I live and work, and acknowledge the Bijikul people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay my respects to elders both past and present. This evening, our presenters, Justin and Rowan from ResMed, an Australian company that is a global leader in sleep technology, will present the story of ResMed's connected devices with, oh, sorry, someone has asked. They will present the story of ResMed's connected devices with a spotlight on the CPAP machine AirSense 11. The CPAP machine complements the N30i mask from our Stories Behind Products number 5 from 3 weeks ago. Our presenters today and the presenters for our Stories Behind Products number 5 have been curated by Cristina Zlemislic-Brancaccio. Cristina is one of our industrial design alumni that works at ResMed as their director, product design, patient interface. Thank you again, Cristina, for curating these 2 stories. Our first presenter, Justin Formica, has an honors degree from UTS and has 30 years of professional career behind him. He's a strategic design and product development innovator and leader with a track record of delivering successful award-winning products to Australian and international markets. He joined ResMed in 2008 and is a crucial member of R&D. Before ResMed, Justin spent several years at Electrolux in senior and management design roles. He also worked in consulting and manufacturing roles on projects as diverse as retail design, packaging, medical, and the exterior and interior design of trains for Australian and international transport networks, including the Hong Kong MTRC and the New South Wales State Rail Millennium train. Our second presenter, Rowan Furlong, is an alumnus of our Industrial Design Honours Program at UNSW. And Rowan began his career as a furniture designer, designing furniture for the hospitality sector at Carcass. Then he moved on to prototype commercial furniture. After 2 years in the furniture industry, Rowan returned to study at General Assembly to make a shift into the emerging sphere of user experience, UX. He then worked at Martech startup and joined ResMed in 2018 as a UX UI designer. So I will now hand over to Justin and Rowan. Over to you.
In case anyone's wondering, I'm Justin, the older one. It goes with the 30 years experience. Nice to have you online.
So my name's Rowan. And before we begin, I just wanted to say it's such an honor to be presenting back at UNSW. I remember during my degree, lots of guest speakers, lots of inside scoops from industry folk. And it's really nice to give back. So I'm really excited about tonight's presentation. Great. So in our first session that you guys heard a few weeks back, Shannon and Paul kind of gave an overview of sleep apnea, talked to the design process around the N30i mask as well. And if you're interested in learning a bit more about that, and if you didn't make the first session, I'd encourage you to go check it out on YouTube. But for now, as Oya alluded to, sleep apnea, it's a condition that affects a lot of people, around 1 billion people worldwide, severely underdiagnosed. Only 80% of those folk have been diagnosed with sleep apnea, and then less again are treated. It's a condition that affects the upper airways, which results in air being cut off to people as they sleep. And currently CPAP therapy, the therapy that ResMed specializes in, is the gold standard for treating sleep apnea. So Shannon and Paul, a few weeks ago, talked to the N30i mask, which you can see there on the left. And in today's session, Justin and myself are going to be talking to the device, which you see in the middle there, and the AirSense 11, and then the MyAir app, which is a companion app that goes along with the therapy. Yeah, so let's get into it. So first I wanted to kind of reiterate the design challenge that we have here at ResMed. We are designing an experience for people who want the outcome, you know, better sleep leading to better overall health. But sometimes necessarily these are people who don't want the product. We know that CPAP therapy in general is sometimes not a very comfortable therapy for people, and it can be kind of hard to get good at using and to kind of get in the rhythm of using. But this is sort of where we start a lot of our product design and user experience design from, this particular sort of standpoint. And so our journey with designing the AirSense 11, which is our latest CPAP therapy device, it began where a lot of our projects begin, which is in understanding the predecessor and understanding the current device that's out in market. We have quite long lead times with our product design, and so by the time we release a product to then design a new product, the market and the users and how our products are being used always changes, always has changed. So in starting off with the AirSense 11 platform, we went back and had a look at our AirSense 10 platform, which is this device you see on the screen on the right. And the way we did that was through some initial baseline user testing. So this is where we get the sort of the whole package, so the device, the tube, the mask, everything that would come in a box. We go to user testing, we present it to users, we get them to unpack it. We say, go for it, unpack it, set this up, ready for a night's sleep. And with the AirSense 10 baseline user testing, we saw that users at times struggled to get started on the therapy. There was sort of several things, components in the bag that were unfamiliar to them. We saw them struggle sometimes with some of the different user guides that we had in the bag. And definitely when it came to then putting therapy on and trying therapy, they were quite surprised as to the sensation of pressure and the feeling of pressure as they try to breathe in and out. And we even had sort of one participant mention that as soon as the pressure started, it felt like they were choking. And this was the learnings from this this baseline testing basically set up a foundation for us for AirSense 11 and some of the things we wanted to achieve with AirSense 11. We saw plenty of opportunities coming from that baseline study. And one of the main things was this setup and acclimatization, you know, understanding what you have in front of you, what it's going to do for you, and how to get the best start to that therapy. And the way that we thought to do that was through the Maya app, the digital experience component of the AirSense 11 platform. So what we did was we developed a feature on the Maya app called Personal Therapy Assistant. So the Maya app is a Bluetooth connected, or it's an app that can Bluetooth connect to the device, to the AirSense 11 device, and be able to control certain components of the device. So Personal Therapy Assistant is a feature within this sort of the setup component of Maya that has sort of three distinct parts. So it has a device setup or machine setup, a mask setup component, and then a component called Test Drive. The machine setup and mask setup were basically features that go into sort of micro steps of how to do each of the parts of setup. You know, these devices, this AirSense 11 device and CPAP devices in general can be quite foreign to a lot of people, and the sort of system view can be quite foreign. And so being able to show them step-by-step users how to connect, say, the tube to the back of the device, how to connect the tube to the mask, and then how to fit the mask correctly are all really important steps in ensuring a patient has the best start to therapy and is most, I guess, familiarized with the components they have. We know that if they're not familiar with these components, if they don't feel like they're 100% confident that they've set up this device correctly, that there's probably a large chance that they're going to fail on therapy and they're not going to continue after a few nights. So this is a really crucial step of the experience as far as we've defined it. The test drive feature is a user-controlled feature in which it allows them to initiate pressure and control pressure at their own pace. And so you can see it there on the right, sort of like a speedometer, and it kind of ramps up through the levels of pressure, and it gives them a feeling of pressure on a very low level, and then they can kind of progress when they're ready up until higher pressures. And at each point of test drive as well, if they experience any leakage, so if there's any air due to an incorrect fit or an sort of incorrectly sized mask, there's sort of help and support that sort of jumps back in to help them fix that part of their mask fit and resolve that leak. And it's these kinds of features that we developed for AirSense 11 to give people the best start to the therapy. And during the progress of AirSense 11, we consistently did some A/B testing where we'd get sort of the prototype of where PTA or personal therapy assistant was at the time, and we would test it with users who were already on therapy and say, how does this compare to your first experience with therapy? And time again, we sort of heard that users were far more comfortable, and they said that if they had this feature when they had been set up, they would have been a lot more confident in starting therapy. So we knew we were on the right track with this feature for AirSense 11. And then when it came time to do our first sort of end-to-end testing, where we had all of the components of AirSense 11 ready from a sort of a product design perspective, that include the bag and the sort of final prototypes of the AirSense 11 device itself, as well as the app, all of the components. We put them all in a bag, and we did the same thing we did for the baseline testing. We sort of gave it to some users and asked them to set it up and let us know when they were done. And unfortunately, we saw some interesting things that we weren't expecting to see. So one of the first ones was that, and this might seem like kind of an innate thing as users, where you receive a bag and there's lots in it. The first thing you want to do is take it all out and play with it and understand what it is and how it fits together. And unfortunately, this meant that the instruction that we had at the time, which was, hey user, hey patient, go and get the myAir app. It's going to help you set this thing up, was sort of disregarded at first, and disregarded quite a lot as we went through user testing. And it was only when patients or users got stuck or they got frustrated did they then start to turn to the other bits of collateral in the bag and then find the myAir app. And then once they were on the myAir app, they said, oh, this is great. I should have just come here first. I should have just come here the first time.
Provided they haven't thrown it away.
Provided they hadn't thrown it away. Yeah, exactly. So, which is another thing. It's another challenge that we've sometimes faced. So this kind of was a little bit disconcerting to us, I guess, when we were user testing. We thought that we had put all of this value, in the myAir app and all of this great support, and users had just breezed right past it. And we knew that what we were seeing in user testing was likely to happen out in the market, out in the field once we release this device. And that's why we do the user testing. They say that so many of the issues that might plague you in sort of a real world context, you'll see with just a few users in a testing environment. And so we knew that we had to make some changes in order to not let this happen and to give users the best start to therapy. So what we did was we changed kind of our goal as far as moving forward from this point. So we changed it to understanding how we could encourage as many users as possible to set up with the Maya app, and that be the first thing they do. And so to do that, we looked at the quick start guide. So in the original testing, we did have a quick start guide, but as Justin alluded to, a lot of people would pick it up and see it as a bit of marketing material or something like that, and kind of place it to the side and wouldn't look at it again for 10 minutes and until they'd really struggled with a component of setup. So we knew that the Maya app had to come first, that it'd have to be prominent, it would have to be eye-catching, it was this kind of just a few seconds that we had once they'd unzipped the bag and looked inside to then capture their attention, to then push them in a direction so that they could get the best start to set up. There was a term that we had coined during the sort of user testing, which was that people went through what we called setup regret, which is where they, as I mentioned before, they would be going through the app and they were like, oh, this is great, this is awesome, like I should have just come here all along. But we knew that it was around the messaging that we had and the quick start guide and the impacts of the quick start guide that was affecting this with testing. And the quick start guide was no easy bit of material to tackle, but that was the sort of the next stage of our design process. So one of the things that we had to sort of understand in redesigning the quick start guide was some of the learnings from the initial testing. So, you know, how we saw people pick it up and put it to the side. So that included, you know, what form did it take? Where in the bag was it going to sit? We also had to understand line assembly requirements. So that was in relation to, you know, we make millions and millions of these devices. And so on the assembly line, every second is dollars, you know? So as they're packing these devices and as they're putting them to the bag, there can't be any sort of convoluted way of putting in a quick start guide or having to fold something or anything like that. So we had to make sure that we understood manufacturing requirements and make sure that they were able to test as well some of the designs that we were bringing forward. We also had to consider costs as well. You know, on projects as big as this, cents equals large amounts of money as soon as you scale up, you know. So the costs of redesigning the quick start guide was a huge factor as well. Managing languages was another one. You know, we ship our products all over the world, and we can't have all of these different variations of the products in order to support different languages. So we needed to understand how we could communicate what we needed to communicate with as few or as little or no words as possible, while still capturing the attention of the user. And then the last one was clinician workflows. So obviously these devices are not just used by our patients, they're also set up and have prescriptions inputted by clinicians and physicians. And part of their workflow is explaining some of the components of setting up a patient in a physician's office. And so we had to make sure that whatever was in the bag, they weren't going to pick up and throw away as well, or assume that it was marketing material, or assume that it wasn't part of the crucial design of the AirSense 11. So there's lots to consider in order for us to bring some prototypes to the next phases of testing. And in total, we brought several designs through to the next phase, and you can see some of them down the bottom there. So the first one there is obviously like a really big bit of quick start guide, a big bit of paper of cardboard right on top of the device, very front and center. The next one was under the device. There was this kind of hypothesis that everyone would take everything out of the bag, and then instructions for where to start would be the first thing or the last thing they look at. And then there's a few other designs that incorporated wrapping the quick start guide around the device, so it wouldn't be thrown away. And then there was one on the end there that dealt with some of the languages or some of the regions where we send devices that support multiple languages or have multilingual sort of demographics. And then you can see there in the top picture there how we tested it. So with one user at a time and sort of laying out all the designs. And the way we went about it was we gave them just one of the concepts, and then as they went through, we wanted them to sort of tell us what they were thinking, what they were wanting to do next. And as soon as they made a decision to say, well, I've got to go get the myAir app now because this is what it's telling me, we would then stop the session, and then we'd kind of investigate as to what they were thinking, what convinced them. And then the second part of the testing was then looking at all the other variations that we had in order to understand what they experienced versus some of our other designs, to kind of get to the bottom of, or get a step closer in understanding which design would accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. And some of the insights that came out of that testing was, first of all, what's on top is what I'm going to look at. So hierarchy was really important. And not only was hierarchy important in terms of the location of the QSG, so right on top, but also the hierarchy of information that was contained on the quick start guide. So you can kind of see in a little bit of detail there that we had sort of from left to right talking about where you can get myAir, that it's an app, and then details about what sort of support it would offer you. So setup, mask setup, device setup, that kind of thing. We also had one concept that had on the reverse of the quick start guide had a schematic, sort of like a system schematic where, you know, tube goes in this end of the device, the mask goes in this end, that kind of thing. A very like non-verbal visual way of demonstrating how to set up the device. And what we noticed was that distracted users. So another really kind of great insight, they would pick up the quick start guide and they would say, well, I've got to go get this app. This is what it's telling me to do. And there was a few that flipped it over and saw some instructions on the schematic on the underside and said, oh, I'll just do that. If there's drawings here, it must be easy enough to do by myself. And this is where we start to see some of those like really, really nuanced insights as to how users were perceiving what was in front of them, and the importance, say, of. So we took all of these learnings into designing the final QSG. And the last point as well was that users wanted more. So there was one concept that just talked to setup, like you have to come to myAir for setup. And there were some comments that were made from users about, you know, I'd like, if I'm going to go to the effort of downloading an app, I'd like to think there's a bit more value in that, and which there is value in the myAir app. The myAir app has the ability to sort of track all of the objective measures of your therapy and give you a myAir score to help you kind of understand how you're actually performing on therapy, and to kind of motivate you to continue on therapy. And so we saw that as an imperative, that we also talked to some of the other features on myAir, which are sort of tracking therapy progress and a myAir score. Yeah, so the quick start guide there you see is the final quick start guide we went with, and it greatly contributed to actually a huge uptick, almost double the amount of myAir app adoption at setup than we saw with our AirSense 10 platform, which is a really, really good indicator of the success of the QSG redesign and how we chose to tackle it. So that was a really important sort of milestone with the AirSense 11 platform. I just checked the time, probably have to run a little bit on this one. But just looking at the user interface now. So this is the sort of touch screen that appears on the device itself. there were a few challenges that we faced with designing for this this touchscreen. It is embedded software, so if you think embedded software is kind of like another example would be you know, sort of the touchscreen on a printer or in a car. So it is a method of developing software that means it's kind of built from the ground up, and because of that, it's quite a rigid bit of software, and it's hard coded onto the device. It had limited RAM as well, 320 by 240 pixels, so quite a small screen. It had to support, as I mentioned before, lots of languages and millions of users. One of the developers told me at one point that the sort of specifications of designing for this AirSense 11 screen was kind of similar to designing for a Game Boy Color. So it had that kind of power. And we had to, when designing for touch and for designing for the AirSense 11, try and use sort of as many tricks in the book, as many sort of ways to make this user interface as modern and as sort of comparable to the experiences we have today with all of our digital devices. So in designing for touch, there's a big difference between AirSense 11 and AirSense 10. AirSense 10 had a sort of a mechanical dial, so you would dial up and select to progress the screens. And now we had a fully functional touchscreen, which was a really good opportunity for us to make the most of the small bit of real estate that we had. And also considering that AirSense 10 has lots of users today, lots of clinicians and physicians, and they have an understanding of how the AirSense platform works and how ResMed products work. And so we had to translate what was a dial screen into a touch screen while maintaining a lot of those important sort of information architecture features, a lot of those kind of design patterns as well. So it wasn't a totally different experience for a physician who sets up, 30 of these a day and then has to go on to set up these new devices. It has to be intuitive, it has to be something they can easily switch onto. So just looking at a little bit of in depth at that, one of the massive things was designing for accessibility with this platform. Our users tend to be slightly older, like an older demographic, and so this touchscreen had to be sort of cognizant of that. So this came down to everything on the UI, including colors, contrast ratios, text, and button sizes. They all had to meet sort of a minimum accessibility standard. And for that, we used Google's Material UI as sort of a benchmark for making sure that this device anywhere in the world would be accessible to the most amount of people possible. And then touching on the sort of the embedded software design, we had to understand, how to manage things like string lengths, So, the word for sleep apnea is, this long in English, but in Russian, it's double the length. So how do you make sure that you've got this interface that can respond to all of these different string lengths and different constraints? Yeah. And then finally, the clinical settings. So this was a really, the presentation has been cut off, but the clinical settings is another one that I've alluded to prior, which is, this is where the clinician or the physician inputs the prescription for the patient. And this is a part of the UI that needed to be very robust in its design. Clinicians set up 30 plus sometimes of these devices a day, so they need to be intuitive, they need to be very usable. And we did a lot of user testing, a lot of evolution in order to make sure that these new designs and this touchscreen would meet, if not exceed, the current setup experience today for clinicians. So one of the things I wanted to call out here was on AirSense 10 we had sort of the pressure settings. So you can see up the top there, you've got a max pressure and a min pressure. for AirSense 11, we took full use of the wide touchscreen and developed a pressure range kind of calendar style picker. This might not seem sort of too kind of groundbreaking, but this was a really sort of important change to the pressure settings in order for clinicians to have a much more efficient and quick setup. And this particular design as well was one of the first UI elements to be submitted for a utility patent at ResMed. So it was a big milestone again for AirSense 11. That's the sort of bulk of what I wanted to get out, but I'll pass now over to Justin, and
Awesome.
we'll take it from here.
Thank you, Rowan. And I'll do my best not to lose my voice as we're presenting. So Rowan's taken you through a bit of, I guess, what we call that new benchmark in our patient experience and engagement, which is, as Rowan mentioned, is really critical to what we do. The other challenge we've had on this project is we're replacing an Air 10 series that's been phenomenally successful for ResMed. So we made many millions of those products. There's 2 factories that are heavily invested in that manufacturing. So, what that means is there's always a lot of pressure to get it right when you're introducing the next generation. So we've really put some focus on some new innovations in design, manufacturing, and delivery to support some of that, which I'll start to go through now. So Rowan's touched a bit on that user-focused design methodology and how we deliver that thoroughly tested product. But, we're also really conscious of delivering a desirable and convenient experience and pushing that leadership position that we pride ourselves on. So rather than go through a lot of the process, Paul and Shannon took you through previously, and Rowan's touched on here. I thought I'd give you a little bit of insight, particularly from an industrial design focus, on areas around where industrial design brings influence into a program. So I'll start a little bit with our approach to strategy. So firstly, let me start with a little bit on how we tackle, I guess, the form. So we don't dive straight into what we do. A lot of what we've done, and you can see things on screen now, is we actually work to a bit of a formula. So we've applied this across a few generations of a product. We're also constantly evolving it. And there's a few things that we do within this. So we're really conscious about how the use of form can influence someone's perception and interaction with a product. So, we've got this belief of simple and organic forms being much more approachable, familiar, and easier to understand for a user. A little bit of structure within that adds some, sense of technical competence. The reason we do that is we really want to leverage that implied trust. People putting a lot of trust within ResMed to support their therapy, and they're looking for a quality product there. So what we want to do is we want to do that with empathy as well. We really strive to deliver an experience that is approachable, familiar, and always human. So we really want to get a human touch to what we do. So you'll see a lot of what we do, and if you get a chance to look at one of the products, there's a lot of attention to detail goes into things like, branding cues, surface textures, the quality of the finish, the quality of the shut lines, etc. This other area that we touch on a bit, and you'll see this in some of our masks as well. We're really conscious of using natural transitions in a lot of our shaping. So you won't see a lot that's just a straight line and a radius. A lot of what we do is around really giving a natural shaping to what we do. And again, it's just about making the product a bit more approachable, a little less technically and hardcore medical than what otherwise people might be expecting. And again, that's all about that empathy angle we're trying to create with the product. Color's an interesting one for any medical device manufacturer. You know, ResMed, we're really conscious of using it as a tool, I guess, for enhancing that user experience. So you would have seen in some of the UI work that Rowan shared, the use of color has been really deliberate there. It's all about driving user interface and engagement. It's not purely as a tool for decoration for us. We really consider color as a functional tool. And it's really there to support the experience. So we're very tactical about how we might use color, and you'll see that emerging if you look through all our products. The color is really, you know, it's an engagement tool to get people to look for the highlight points to interact with, buttons to press, components to be removed, clips to be engaged with. So that adds a bit of sophistication and value to the user experience. You know, and it's all about being that tool to enhance the usability, you know, and really drive a product that is easy, simple, and intuitive to use. And we're really conscious about doing that in a really consistent manner. So to give you a bit of insight into that, we do have a corporate palette, which we pretty rigidly stick to. You know, I often get challenged on why it can't be a free-for-all in how we use these things. And it's because that user experience is so paramount, you know, so, and people are coming at these products, I guess somewhat not engaged. Ron touched on that a bit earlier, where, you know, people aren't familiar with the notion of sleep apnea therapy. Our products are foreign to people often the first time they approach them. So if we're not consistent in our interactions or the way to engage our product, it's only going to be detrimental to that experience. You know, so we really see our use of color as part of that toolkit, and it's quite important. You know, it's very easy to overlook how color can be used, but it's really quite an important thing for us and how we use it consistently. So that's a bit of background on strategy. I thought that might be quite useful to share because it gives you a bit of an insight on how we bring some of those traditional industrial design tools into our approach to designing a product. So with that, I might share a few slides that walk you through the product itself. You know, so early on in the piece, the Air 11 design team was set the challenge of replacing that Air 10 series, which was an innovative product for us. It's been super successful. You know, and we did target that new benchmark in patient experience and engagement. But at the same time, we were really focused on bringing in those new innovations in design, manufacturing, and delivery. And what I mean by that is, you know, areas that I guess enhance the bottom line of the business as well as the patients we serve. You know, so, you know, ResMed prides themselves on market leadership, and our strong growth continues to drive an increase in volumes of product we make, produce, and ship. Certainly the world of global pandemic in the last couple of years have really driven that into really, you know, important value for us. You know, so in some instances, the cost to ship product to our markets has gone up 5 or 10-fold. So what that means is you've got to be really conscious of the efficiency of the product you're designing. It's not an exercise in isolation. You know, so within that, we set several ambitious targets to address waste, cost, efficiency that most projects do, but this one was critically important. So one particular area of focus I'd like to take you through is it was identified fairly early in the project that addressing the materials and volume of our packaging was a key enabler in both in reducing our environmental footprint, but also our cost to serve. So what I mean by our cost to serve is, whatever we spend getting a product to a patient impacts the value we can give to that patient. We're always working towards target prices and all. So the more efficiently we can deliver that product, the more we can demand that value for the patient. So it's really critical, especially from a designer's point of view, that you want to give the user as much of that value as possible. So what we did, we took a really holistic approach at the genesis of the project, and really delved into how the product architecture may influence those factors and open some opportunities to drive innovation. So with that, we actually managed, working very collaboratively with many engineers across the building here. The Air 11 improves key aspects of performance, but we've defined an architecture that is slimmer and uses slightly less volume than Air 10. But we've used that volume in a much more, I guess, holistic or deeply thought through way. So within that, not only have we conceived a more consumer aesthetic and user-friendly shape, we've dramatically impacted the efficiency of how we ship Air 11 to our market. So we all care about the environment, and we're really conscious of driving that through. So we're really proud about some of the gains we've made there. So with that, we've managed to actually get Air 11 to palletize with dramatic gains over the previous product. Like I'm talking many millions of dollars ultimately will be saved over the life of the product. But at the same time, we're delivering a reduction of over more than 300 metric tons of cardboard per annum to deliver the product to market. So that's a substantial reduction over the previous generation of the product, and it'll be a multiplier the more we make. So the value is really there in applying the effort. So as a team, we're really proud of that, and that goes all the way back to those fundamental architectural decisions that we made early in the project. So what do I mean by that? We looked at every assembly and component set and every piece of dead space and air within this unit, and challenged ourselves and had lots of robust conversations with the mechanical engineering groups and pressure system groups and all. Friendly conversations, of course. But that's part of the challenge of product development is looking for opportunity and challenging what we do. And this is a really important for an industrial designer coming through to remember is it's very much a collaborative process. So what I mean by that is, you've got to work and build partnerships to achieve outcomes for the betterment of both the product and the company you're working for and the people you're serving, which is ultimately the customers, or in our case, it's the patients we serve. So within that, we, a thorough analysis and redesign of the product architecture, we reduced components, we reduced volume, we ended up with a slimmer device, as I mentioned, all over the previous Air 10 product. you know, whilst improving performance, which is really key. So hang on, sorry, I'll jump back one slide, my bad. We've managed to also do that while kind of really boosting the efficiency of this product to manufacture. So it's faster, easier to manufacture than the previous generation. It's really designed with the consideration of our supply chain efficiency in mind as well. And all of that's around getting a better product, higher yield of product to market more readily. How we going? Better scoot through the last few slides, keep some momentum. So I'll touch a little bit on how that holistic approach to design, we can use that to defend value and lift sustainability. So one of the things you'll see here, if the slide animates, which it just did, thankfully, is we managed to really slim the vertical height of the product over the previous generation of devices. You know, so that not only enhances that customer and patient perception, they see it as a real nice generational breakthrough, but it did facilitate the dramatic gains in shipping efficiency and reduction in packaging materials. And that required strong collaboration amongst our many technical disciplines to get that across the line. So what does that mean? I just tried to very simply illustrate that for you. You can see that line there, a 7-figure saving opportunity. You know, so that's something we're chasing down. So for a business like ResMed, you know, delivering product efficiently, cost efficiently, saving money where you can, and this is money that has no value to the patient, is really important. So what we managed to do there is come up, that facilitated these new packaging innovations, which we also applied, you know, which could often be considered not so sexy. But as I said, we managed to save a substantial amount of cardboard per device. We're using 100% recycled cardboard in the shipping carton, and that's contributing to a reduction of more than 300 metric tons of cardboard per annum over the Air 10 device. You know, so we're pretty proud of that. And I just want to highlight that's the value, some really depth of thought from an industrial design team early in a project can bring value into the whole mix. You know, so this gives you a bit of an idea. Over previous generations of the device, very simply, we managed to move from 4 units a shipper to 5 units a shipper, 100 units on a pallet as opposed to 60. That's, you know, 67% extra product in the shipping container. So I think you all get the value of that. Obviously, there's less space, less movements required, but fundamentally, that means we can save a lot of these guys. You know, they're not the most environmentally friendly thing to ship around the world. They're not particularly cheap to ship around the world at this point in time either, in the world of the global pandemic. So that manages to defend that value. So what I mean is the money we save there, we can defend as value we bring back to the patient in terms of better product experience, investment in our future portfolio. So that's a little bit of a taste of what industrial design can bring to the mix. You know, I would like to say above all else, we're really proud to do what we do for the users we serve. You know, that's what gives us a lot of us here at ResMed as designers, creators, engineers. We really are proud of what we do and really improving the lives of the patients we serve. I'm going to leave with a little bit of a sizzle and hype video. if we can get that to play. And then we'll may have a couple of minutes for questions. We'll get that to play. This is a bit of a teaser from our launch.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you our future. Our future. Our future. Our future.
Y'all please hold the applause to the end of the ceremony. Let's go. Look around us, there ain't no fences, just bridges to the ears of the listeners. On deck, take a swing, sharper senses, looking for a weakness in the system. Finally, it's you and me, here shaking like a tambourine. We in this finally, both sides of the cemetery. Attention people, y'all get ready. This is for everybody.
Yeah, there we go. And that's us.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We have to upload first. Okay, so we have time for questions. Fantastic timing. And I can see a few questions that popped up here. So we'll start with the question from Doug Nash. And the question is for Justin. And he's asking, how important is the form language and semiotics looking like a consumer electronic product versus a medical one?
Great
And there's
question.
more follow-up questions. Is it more important to look competently medical or like a fancy digital clock radio?
It's firstly, Doug, really great to hear from you. It's been a long time. It's a really interesting one because for us, it's very much about finding that balance. We can't be too fashion driven. You know, there's a long life to our products. We're serving a global market as well. So what we are trying to do, and I hope I touched on a little bit, is we're trying to find the balance behind that approachable product that displays a bit of consumer-esque form, but we need to maintain that level or sense of medical competence in what we do. So that the aesthetic is very much that fine line between not too consumer, but we don't want to be too hardcore medical because we run the risk of really reinforcing everything that makes therapy hard for people. And that's that negative mindset that they often enter our product space with.
Definitely. I think we hear it in user testing all the time. When we put sort of even current products of the day, like that users can buy today, in front of them, they say, oh, is that it? Oh, I thought it was this big machine, because they all have, you know, an auntie or an uncle who had a CPAP machine 15, 20 years ago. And that's the aesthetic and the expectation that people today still carry about a lot of CPAP products.
Great answers. So I hope it answers your questions, Doug. The next question is from Demet Dincher, and she says, hi, thank you for your presentation, Justin and Rowan, and thanks for organizing Oya. I wonder if any design changes were applied to the headset, the mask, and the strap at AirSense 11, or are there any plans for such a change? Thanks.
I'll tackle that one. We're always working on the future. So I guess the best thing we can say is, you know, Air 11, well, I was about to say Air 11's, we put that one to bed, but we're still working really hard on it. There's multiple variants of that to go, multiple markets we still have to launch in. So our product portfolio is a constant evolution. You know, we have many engineers constantly working on new innovations, new ways to do things. So I just watch this space. Look into what ResMed are doing online, and you'll see what's coming.
Okay, so the next question, or shall I say series of questions, come from Matt Houlihan. And there's questions for both of you. So he's asking, I'd be interested to hear about the collaboration between industrial designer and the UX designers, how and when everyone was inclined in the process. So Rowan spoke about the challenges, considerations that were made due to the small screen size on the device. Could there have been potential for a larger screen? Were the UX designers included earlier enough in the design phase to potentially influence some of the choices made?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Great question, Matt, and great to see you online. Matt was a sort of former student in my.
Yeah, you set that one up, did you?
Yeah, you did well, Matt. Great question. Yeah, I think the collaboration with UX and ID starts from the beginning of the project. I'll let you answer some of the questions around the componentry.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as far as, I mean, UX sort of owns a lot of the user interface work, and then the industrial design work. I mean, it's all coming together in one product. Yeah. So we're constantly, from a UX perspective, sort of responsible for testing some of the usability and the industrial design sort of elements, as well as the stuff that we've had a hand in designing. So that's the kind of the relationship. It's pretty abreast for most of the project, especially in the early parts.
Yeah, often it is really immersive, and I'd be doing a disservice without mentioning like all the wider teams that are involved in that very early phase. So when it comes to something like a user interface on a product, you know, there are a whole bunch of factors that tell us what we can and can't do. You know, obviously we could throw a bigger screen and more memory and everything at the product, but that would make every product we build more expensive. Might make it harder to procure componentry. It potentially means it uses more power. One of the things we're really passionate about is in enhancing that user experience via the digital application. So a lot of what you'll see in terms of the work Rowan described and the work we'll do going forward is how we enhance that experience away from the product. So you then need to find the balance that, you know, we could throw an extra $5 at the product, but if the user has really discovered the value of the digital experience on their phone, that $5 and probably the additional power that the product will draw is a negative from an holistic point of view. So, you know, product design is always about finding that right level of compromise. You know, it's one of the hardest part of our jobs is that negotiation and conversation and really nutting that down in terms of what the right level to spend is. You know, so we could have had a bigger screen and a bigger display and more memory and power, but it would have been a device that uses more electricity for every user on the planet. And a lot of our users, once bedded in, are really happy to use the digital application and the stop-start on the device. So we're really conscious of driving that experience digitally.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance and a playing off. I mean, these products are going to be in the market for a long time, you know. So if we can leverage, you know, someone's phone, they're responsible for, you know, buying their own phone and having that bit of technology that we can leverage, then, you know, it's a much richer experience on a phone. Yeah. And so as we see the kind of the shift from like more and more people acquiring smartphones, we sort of start to see that becomes the possible primary way of engaging with them and their therapy.
Great answers. One more question from Ahmed Dana. He says, thanks for the presentation and that awesome video. How do you handle ethical issues when user testing in the early stages of the product? And how close do you work with doctors and patients during the process?
Yeah, great question. So I'd be interested to know, maybe if he's got time to chuck it in the chat, what his sort of ethical concerns are. But I mean, some of the ethical things that we sometimes have to understand is obviously testing with people who haven't been diagnosed, but quite possibly might have sleep apnea. In some of our kind of clinical trials that we run, we have to sometimes be aware that we're not, I guess, preventing someone from having therapy for the process of testing, or for the process of understanding something. Just because if they've told us something that alludes to the fact that they might need therapy or have this, then there is a bit of a duty there on our part to make sure that they're getting therapy.
Yes, it's also fair to say any testing we do in the medical product space is, we're very well advised by medical advisors, ethical advisors, and everything we do needs to be driven by an approved protocol. So we can't just jump out and go testing. You know, we need to review that, get that approved by appropriately qualified parties.
And to answer the question around, do we talk to doctors and physicians? For sure, it's one of the three kind of user groups that, whether it be patients, clinicians, or physicians, we definitely engage with these users as early as possible. They're the closest to the patients, and they're the closest to their business if they're sort of a customer of ours, and the closest to the care of these patients. And so trying to understand, and the challenge I think sometimes for us is that this varies from region to region. You know, the way that care is delivered varies from region. The way that our products get to patients varies wildly. So trying to understand the trends and the sort of consistencies amongst all of those, and then distill them into requirements that help us design these products is the challenge. But that's why we start so early, and that's why we're so thorough. We don't want to miss anything.
Great. And you mentioned that doctors are, you know, you're servicing doctors as well. So my question is there a different mode for clinicians in the settings? You know, a mode that they can override that the normal users won't see? Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah, there's a clinical settings menu that's accessed via sort of a secret handshake on the device, kind of get you into another special or a different restricted part of the user interface. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We are going to, so I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to both of you, Justin and Rowan. It was really an excellent story, and you are doing such a great service to people who are using these devices to make life a little bit more easier for them, a little bit more unmedical, let's say, user-friendly, and like a friend in their bedroom. I know it because my husband has been trying so many of these devices. So yes, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And to all our attendees this evening, thank you for joining us and making the evening even more special, especially with your questions. But before ending the session, I'd like to talk about the next presentation already that we have scheduled for October this year. Again, one of our alumnus, Carlos Sayep from Vitra, will be the next presenter for our Stories Behind Products number 7. And he will tell us the story of an office chair he designed for Cedars, the C-Motion office chair. And so stay tuned for the invitation to this event, and we look forward to seeing you again for the following Stories Behind Products. Until then, be safe and well. Goodbye. And thank you again, Rowan and Justin.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone else.